Sure, it happens every 4 years, but this year is different. Yes, a presidential election always impacts the financial markets in some way, but what can investors expect from this historic election, depending on the outcome? It's that time again, time to tune out the hype and focus on the facts. Yes, facts that matter to you, the income generation. Let's get started. Get ready to separate reality from myth.
Joining me right now is Sound Income Strategies founder and CEO David Scranton.
They've created a new type of inflation, and although markets have always been an emotional place, they seem to be even more of an emotional place these days.
Jeffrey Small, market watcher, is with me.
Stock market dynamic is getting ready to significantly change.
So let's bring in our co-host, Jeff Small, president of Arbor Financial Services, and also the brand ambassador for the Retirement Income Store. When it comes to economic forecasting, one of the best tools that we have for trying to predict the future is actually the past. The consistency of historic patterns often gives us an accurate peek at what may lie ahead. In fact, a recent U.S. Bank analysis of stock market data going all the way back to the 1930s revealed patterns about how the markets actually perform during and just after an election year. Other studies have revealed similar findings, which analysts are looking at now to prepare investors for the potential impact of this year's election. Now, of course, historical data is only one consideration. There are always other factors that can influence the financial markets after an election, and that's especially true this year. We'll discuss those factors today and look at what history tells us about where the markets might be headed after Tuesday's election. We'll also talk specifically about what everyday investors like you can do to help prepare your personal finances for the road ahead, whatever that might be. Joining me and my co-host Jeff Small will be one of our favorite guests, Steve Forbes, Chairman, CEO, and Editor-in-Chief at Forbes Media. We'll also hear from financial advisor David Wright, who owns a retirement income store in Ohio. But before we bring in Steve Forbes, let's talk generally about what history tells us regarding the impact of presidential elections on financial markets. According to a recent survey by Hartford Funds, the majority of investors, actually 93%, believe the presidential race will affect the stock market. 84% of those people say they believe that will affect their investing habits. And that same survey found that 62% said they're likely to make changes to their financial plan in the 12 months following the election. None of this is surprising, although historically speaking, many investors may be overestimating the election's potential impact. We all remember the so-called Trump bump, right? When the stock market soared in the wake of President Trump's victory in 2016. And as dramatic as it may have seemed, it was hardly unprecedented. Many presidents have enjoyed market spikes equal to or greater than the president's during their first year, including Herbert Hoover, Dwight Eisenhower, JFK, and Bill Clinton. In other words, a so-called honeymoon period for the stock market when a new president is elected is actually fairly common. But they also mean little in the long run. In fact, historically speaking, after an election, stock market returns tend to be slightly lower for the following year in a general way, and lower still when a new party comes into power. When the presidency changes hands, stock market gains average 5%, according to that U.S. Bank analysis. Now, when the same president is reelected or one party retains control of the White House, market growth is slightly higher at an average of 6.5%. Again, these figures are based on historical averages, but obviously things can differ from one election to the next. For example, Donald Trump's so-called honeymoon period lasted longer than normal, and in the year following his election, all the major market indices rose by about 20% or more. And that, as you'll recall, was a result of Wall Street's pricing the impact of the president's massive corporate tax cuts into the market before these tax cuts even took effect. Though the cuts did help ramp up the economy, the 4 to 5% GDP growth promised by the president on his campaign trail really were never able to materialize, and the markets evened out again in 2018. In fact, they ended that year down, thanks largely to uncertainty about the president's trade war with China. The point is that the impact of a presidential election can seem dramatic in the short term, but it ultimately may mean very little in the broader picture. Now, of course, this election year is different in many ways. The most obvious being that a global pandemic is still fueling massive economic uncertainty. How might the pandemic play into the election's impact on the markets? And how might Wall Street react specifically to a Trump win or to a Biden win? We'll be talking about that more coming up in just a bit. Now it's time to welcome my good friend and co-host, Jeff Small, president of Arbor Financial Services, a retirement income store located in Melbourne, Florida. Jeff, of course, is our very own brand ambassador for the Retirement Income Store and Amazon best-selling author of the book, Turning Financial Planning Right Side Up. And we also want to bring back one of the best friends of the income generation, our good friend Steve Forbes, chairman, CEO, editor-in-chief at Forbes Media. Steve has written several best-selling books, and he's also campaigned for president twice. Steve, thanks so much for being back with us.
Good to be with you again. Thank you.
All right, so what's going to happen on Tuesday? Tell us, we're all ears.
Well, if I actually knew that, I would be in Vegas making the bets on it so I could win enough money to finally get on the Forbes rich list. Right now, I'll give some predictions, but I would not bet one Zimbabwe dollar, which is about 10 billion Zimbabwe dollars to one US dollar these days on the exchange rate. But I think Trump will actually win the Electoral College. I think he'll win states like Florida, Pennsylvania, and Ohio. And I think the GOP will maintain the Senate. If Trump wins the White House again, they can have 50-50 in the Senate and still maintain it because Vice President Pence will be there to break any ties. But if Trump loses and we lose the Senate, then we're in for short term, a very grim period, very grim.
What's worst case scenario? I mean, you talked last time you were on the show a couple months ago about extra regulation and all the things that could happen. But let's say worst case, we get a blue sweep. What does that mean for income generation members?
Well, for the market and for the economy, it's bad news. The economy's done very well since the lockdowns of March and April. Blue states are lagging red states because they've been slower to open up, but it's been a remarkable recovery. But we still have a distance to go. When you actually shut an economy down, it takes time to rebuild it. And so you look at what the Democrats are proposing, and make no mistake, the left wing of the Democrat Party is going to push hard to get this done as quickly as possible if they have control of the Senate, because they'll abolish the filibuster. So you take a 40% capital gains tax, that's going to hit equities. You take a 33% rise in the business tax, that means less money for business investment, less money for salaries for workers. You take a huge rise in the personal income tax, that means less savings, less investing. Bad stuff. Regulations, we know regulations are the equivalent of taxation, very damaging to small businesses, which hurts the economy. We all know they want to destroy oil and the gas industry. Yeah, Biden is telling the truth when he says he won't ban fracking. He'll just smother it by regulations, just as they did, Biden and Obama did with the coal industry during the early 2000, between 2009 and 2017. They bankrupted most of those companies.
Yeah, and Biden's
bad news all around.
And Biden's recent comments about oil might have very well pushed the state of Pennsylvania over the Trump camp. At least that's all we can hope for. Jeff?
Well, yeah, Steve, I can't wait for $4 a gallon gas. I mean, that's exactly what they're going to do by executive orders. You mentioned in the prior show, he can do a lot of damage just with executive orders if Biden gets elected. He's going to reinstate all the old Obama energy policies, and they're going to push gas prices up to $4 a gallon. You know who gets hurt the worst on that $4 a gallon gas, Steve? Their voters. Why do their voters even listen to them? I have no idea.
Well, what's even more amazing is why people in Silicon Valley, why people on Wall Street who should know better in terms of the right kind of environment for growth. I guess Wall Street does it as a sort of a protection money payments that hopefully they won't make the hanging so painful when they get in power. But they should have no illusions. The far left of the Democrat Party is out for blood, and they want a clean sweep of everything. They want to control everything. So these equity funds that are supporting them, carried interest out the window. That'll be one of the first things they do. So I don't know what planet these people are on. And the other thing to keep in mind is when they say, oh, well, the Federal Reserve will pump in more money or the government spending will keep the economy growing, it's nonsense. Though you printing money, we know where that's going to lead. And government spending, where do they get the money from? They get it from real resources from the economy. If you depress the economy, government doesn't create resources. It's a formula for what we had in the 70s, stagnation and inflation.
Yeah, I love what you said about protection money. So I guess what you're saying is the new realm, AOC, Bernie Sanders and company, Pelosi, they're basically the new version of the Teflon Don, apparently, or they could be if things don't go the way we hope on Tuesday. We have much more coming up in terms of words of wisdom from our good friend Steve Forbes in just a minute. We'll be right back. So if nothing major changes between the taping of the show and November 3rd, Democratic candidate Joe Biden will be heading into Election Day with a substantial lead, according to the incumbent President Donald Trump in most polls. Of course, most polls also put Hillary Clinton ahead of Trump by a wide margin 4 years ago. Yet the popular vote was close enough for the president to win the Electoral College and become president, with Republicans also taking control of Congress. Could the same thing happen again, despite the fact that this is a very different race and in many ways a very different world from 4 years ago? And if so, will the stock market celebrate again, pandemic or no pandemic? Obviously, no one knows for sure. And we may not have an answer until long after election night. You know, with millions of Americans having already voted by mail and millions more expected to do so, you can bet the ballot counting process is going to be a long and messy one. And this is especially true with Republicans still questioning the security of mail-in voting. So unless a major landslide for one candidate or the other becomes evident on election night, we may have a presidency and an entire government in limbo for weeks. That could shake up the markets, but how might they react to different scenarios once it's all sorted out? Well, let's consider some of the possibilities. The first possibility is President Trump is reelected and Congress remains split between Republican and Democratic leadership. In other words, status quo. Given that the markets hate uncertainty and like stability, theoretically investors would welcome this outcome. Small companies would likely rally, along with sectors that have done well under Trump's presidency, such as technology, energy. On the other hand, it could also mean a resurgence in uncertainty over the president's trade policies, not to mention some people who are questioning the handling of the pandemic. But now let's consider the other extreme. Biden wins and there's a Democratic sweep in Congress. Most analysts agree that would likely mean a market sell-off, since Biden would look to reduce or repeal the corporate tax cut. In other words, the impact of the pandemic would likely make it difficult for Biden to raise taxes on businesses anytime soon. At least that would be the hope. He and Democrats would more likely be focused on approving the second round of coronavirus relief that's been used as a political pawn by both parties since August. Now, odds are that investors would celebrate that move, and that could help lessen the severity of any potential market dip. The third scenario, of course, is that Biden wins the presidency, but congressional power remains split. Again, history shows that markets in general do better with a divided government. Some analysts feel it would be a best-case scenario this time because it offers some level of stability, plus the potential for more progress in addressing the COVID-19 crisis, the crisis which we'll be talking about more coming up in just a bit. Now it's time to bring back in our co-host, Jeff Small, as well as our good friend and guest, Steve Forbes, Chairman, CEO, Editor-in-Chief at Forbes Media. So Steve, I understand all the reasons why Biden presidency, at least according to the books, is bad for small business, ultimately bad for the economy. But short term, can we ignore the fact that they're trying to have Congress put $3 trillion of money into taxpayer hands? Could it just be almost like we get a false positive, a real little economic surge at the beginning of the presidency? And should Biden become president, then people think, well, everything's really okay? Your thoughts?
Well, in terms of short-term stuff, they will try that. But markets try to anticipate the future. And if Biden wins and has Congress and he starts proposing these tax increases, the markets are not going to be fooled by any short-term boost from the government, because they know that's just it, short-term, and then bad things happen. And you don't get a sustainable growing economy without positive investment from the private sector, without people taking risks, without stable money. And look what they're going to do on healthcare. When Biden says he favors a public option, that means a government insurance company, which will have subsidies, which will drive out private insurance or force private insurance to merge in with the government. So the markets aren't going to be fooled if they follow through on that leftist agenda.
Yeah, well, you think after the struggles they've had trying to ensure things like Medicare and Social Security, seemingly not doing such a great job, I agree. We certainly don't want to go in that direction. So cross our fingers and toes and certainly hope for sure we don't have a blue sweep. Jeff?
Well, Steve, the markets may not get fooled, but our clients are our customers are the income generation, the viewers and the listeners here are the ones that always get hurt, and they're basically bag holders in this kind of environment. But Wall Street's giving double the money to Biden than they're giving to Trump. So you have to think that they like the global flair of what Biden is going to bring to the table, and how, China is going to be made in China, not made in the USA. But needless to say, my phone has been ringing off the hook the last couple of weeks from investors who are saying, what do we do going forward? There's so much uncertainty in the markets. And today we see that going forward. So my question to you is, what would a protracted decision and who the president's going to be do to the markets going forward? And what should investors, for our viewers, the income generation, do on that basis? If it takes a month or 2 months to go on in the election, figure out who the president's going to be, what should they do at this time, Steve?
Well, if it's just about the presidency, that would be one thing. But what happens in the Senate? If it looks like the Republicans are going to keep the Senate, that would remove a major uncertainty out there. And so that means if Biden did win the presidency, there'd be at least some restraints in terms of packing the Supreme Court, gutting labor laws and doing away with right to work laws, raising taxes substantially. There'd be a blocking there, effective block. But so again, it depends on the uncertainty we have. I worry less about an uncertain outcome because of litigation and the like than who actually takes the oath of office. The Congress comes in early January, and the president is January 20th. If you want to go to the extreme, all you have to do is go back to 1876 when they had a contested election, a bitterly contested election, and it wasn't until the day before inauguration that they finally determined who would be taking the oath of office the following day. We won't know until we see it. And so speculating is fine, but one reason I think the markets are volatile is we just don't know.
Okay.
Well
put, yes. So 60 seconds. What's your best feel for a market forecast in 2021 under a Trump presidency versus under a Biden presidency? What should our income generation members know, at least from your experience?
Well, if we have Trump in a Republican Senate, it'll overall be pretty good. We'll get another tax cut. Deregulation will continue. And with Biden in there, it's the exact opposite. If they have the Congress, it's going to be very, very bloody. And short term, the markets are going to take a hit. But by the way, if Biden gets in, I think it's going to trigger such an adverse reaction, especially when Kamala Harris kicks him out under the 25th Amendment, that we're going to get the roaring 20s of the right kind. We have to remember 100 years ago, the roaring 1920s started out very badly and then had a spectacular run. And if we don't make mistakes, we can have another roaring 20s.
So you do believe that, just in closing, that if even under a Biden presidency, you do believe that there's a good chance that he won't be in the Oval Office for the entire 4 years?
No way. They will kick him out, force him out, because the left wants a real lefty in there, and they know Kamala Harris is that. They know Biden can be rolled over, but they want their own in there. So you're gonna see some pretty ugly stuff of trying to get Joe Biden out and Kamala Harris in the Oval Office. But either way, I think by 2024 you're going to see a severe reaction, and we'll be inoculated from this left-wing socialist kind of ideology for a good long time.
Yeah, well, all right. Can't wait to talk to you again after the election, after the results are known, to see how things are going.
Yes, we'll all be experts by
That's
then,
right.
maybe.
That's right. They will have good predictions. So, Steve, thanks so much for being back on the show. We really do appreciate it, as always. And you stay with us. We have a lot more coming up in just a moment in the income generation. I'm David Scranton. I'm here with Jeff Small, and we'll be right back. Shaking up the markets as a whole is one way this election could impact your personal finances, but there are other potential impacts linked to the candidates' policies on different issues. We already mentioned a Biden win would likely mean an effort to repeal or reduce the president's corporate tax cut. However, there would likely be other tax consequences of a Biden victory as well. While Biden has promised not to raise taxes on individuals earning less than $400,000 a year, he says he does plan a tax increase for Americans earning more than that. His plan would also likely include the return of full state and local tax, or what we call SALT deductions, which could possibly offset a substantial part of his increase, even for people in higher tax states. Naturally, this is a key issue for Americans in and nearing retirement, since tax laws are an enormous factor when creating and managing your retirement income strategy. Another factor, of course, is Social Security. With the program's funding already in jeopardy of running out and the pandemic potentially speeding up that process, restoring Social Security's solvency has been a major focus in Washington. Of course, Biden has promised a plan that would boost benefits for low-income households while raising taxes on high earners as part of his effort to make up the program shortfall. The shortfall currently stands at $53 trillion, according to the latest trustees report. While President Trump has promised to protect Social Security and Medicare, he's also implemented a temporary payroll tax deferral, which allows employers and employees to delay paying Social Security payroll taxes to the end of this year. He's also vowed to forgive those payments altogether if reelected. One more key issue retirees and near retirees will want to keep an eye on after election, of course, is health care. If Biden wins and Democrats sweep, many expect it will take a tougher stance on drug prices, putting pressure on pharmaceutical and biotech industries. What that could mean for drug costs and the market stability of those sectors going forward really is anyone's guess. However, a couple of things are probably certain. One is that arguments over government's role and government's reach in the healthcare industry will rage on no matter who wins, along with arguments over universal coverage. And two, medical and healthcare costs will continue to increase at a substantially faster and higher rate than the general rate of inflation, just as they have for the past 90 years, regardless who's been in the Oval Office. And that's really the most important thing for you to keep in mind as you factor the issue of healthcare into your financial plan, no matter who wins on Tuesday. Now it's time to bring back my good friend and co-host, Jeff Small. So Jeff, no surprise to me with what we heard from Steve Forbes. He a little less animated. He's calmer than I expected 2 days before the election, right? But I still don't know if I agree. I still think Wall Street is so addicted to all this easy money that I still think that another tranche of the CARES Act, if it's $3 trillion versus less than $1 trillion, I still think that at least short term has to have some positive effects on the stock market. Long term, I agree, but short term, I think it could help. Do you think so, or do you think I'm just being too Pollyanna with that?
No, I think you're right about the short-term effects of it, but you can't keep adding stimulus faster than you can grow the economy or faster than you can grow revenues, top or bottom numbers, Dave. I mean, this is crazy. This is Depression-era type strategies to keep the system insulated from a collapse. When they did $7 trillion of stimulus in 3 weeks. It took us 4.5 years to do $5 trillion during the 2008-2009 meltdown is what the Fed did. So it takes a long time. We did it in 3 weeks. And so now they're going to throw another $2 to $3 trillion on top of it. That's crazy money. Crazy money. I mean, why even bother paying tax anymore if they're going to do that?
And what's interesting is the markets, with the exception of a few days last week, the markets have actually held fairly well in spite of the fact that Congress has been battling now for 2 months about this next tranche. So, do we really need that big of a tranche? Or are the markets assuming, post-election we'll get the $3 trillion? I don't know.
I think we're really going to need it, and later rather than sooner, because earnings have outperformed despite this challenging economic environment. That's really what's carried the market up. It's earnings combined with the stimulus. So, next year earnings are not going to be nearly as glamorous as the tailwinds of COVID catch up to the economy.
Yeah, I think you're right on that for sure. And I love. Do you like my comparing Bernie Sanders and AOC to the Teflon Don? I thought that was kind of interesting when he talked about protection money. I was surprised to hear him say it that way. I thought it was funny.
Well, it's interesting to see what's happening as Biden's campaigns are stuffed with cash from Wall Street. And you have to wonder, why in the world would they do that? And it's because of the globalist mentality. They want to have that global span. They don't want a America First policy because that works against the grain when you want to populate the world with your brand and or products. Yeah, I mean, I get that. There's some truth in that. But still, all the extra regulation that they would have to do, especially in a blue sweep. I think about just my business, you think about your business, and we're not some publicly traded Wall Street company, but still you have to think about that and say, the extra regulation, is that something that's really going to help or hurt your business? And net, I would think that's almost got to hurt more than globalization will help. Maybe I'm missing something. Well, I don't think you're missing anything, but I hate to be a fatalist here, but I think that the freedom of economics are being questioned by the left in its entirety as we oversubsidize the economy and want to give free everything to everybody. That's not how freedom of economics works. That's not how free enterprising works. That's not how we can all benefit and live the American dream. What happens to the dream if you give away everything free, Dave? Yeah. The dream is gone. That's right. Okay, so you got slightly less than a minute left. Our viewers are sitting here. They're on our side of the table. They've got 2 days left to influence their liberal friends to get away from the dark side. Give them 60 seconds or less, the best ammunition you can give them to help their friends see the light. The best ammunition is and I don't care if you're Democrat, Independent, or Republican, if you look at things through an economic prism and you say, who's going to put the right policy in place to make an all-inclusive economy? Who's going to be the candidate? Forget about everything else. Who's going to create the most inclusive economy on the planet for the members of its country, for its citizenry? Who do you think it's going to be? We all know what the answer is. Even people that don't like him are going to say it's going to be Trump, but that's how we have to see things. Without the power of economics, we can't move people forward, Dave. Yeah, and we're not a socialist country, but there's some that are trying to slowly pull us in that direction. And if Steve Forbes is right, that essentially Biden being more intermediate won't make it, well, then you get the extreme left in there, and next thing you know, we're heading towards socialism. And once you start that slippery slope, you never turn back. So, all right, we need to take another break. You stay with us. We have much more to come right here on The Income Generation. I'm Dave Scranton. I'm here with Jeff Small, and we'll be right back. I'm David Scranton. During my career, I found that most baby boomers have done a great job growing their retirement savings, yet many don't know how to convert their savings into steady income. And that is why I built the Retirement Income Store, to help hardworking Americans preserve their assets and establish steady streams of income.
If you're 55 or older, our free Retirement Income Kit is for you. It's chock full of information you need to know to get steady income during your retirement. Call 866-710-1749. Online at theretirementinComestore.com.
The Income Generation is now available on YouTube. Subscribe to The Income Generation so you never miss a show. You can watch all your favorite episodes now in one place, as well as catch up with your favorite financial guests. Subscribe now to The Income Generation, only on YouTube.
David J. Scranton's groundbreaking new book, The Retirement Income Story, will revolutionize the way baby boomers and their advisors plan and save for retirement. The Retirement Income Story, the story behind the launch of the Retirement Income Store, is about to shatter many of the myths Wall Street bankers have promoted and protected for decades. David outlines what he believes to be a much better method for planning and saving for retirement, one that doesn't involve taking on more stock market risk. In fact, most will be able to reduce and or possibly even eliminate stock market risk while creating renewable streams of income they can count on well into their retirement years. The simple truth is that if you were born in 1968 or sooner, you can't afford to ride out another catastrophic stock market drop like the ones in 2000 and 2007. Read The Retirement Income Story and revolutionize the way you plan and save for retirement.
As with every other aspect of our lives, Tuesday's election has a major unknown variable at its core. This time, it's the coronavirus. With cases expected to continue spiking throughout fall and throughout winter, the devastating economic impact for many industries could get worse before it gets better. Now, as I've already mentioned, the second round of relief intended to help businesses as well as the unemployed has been held up by bipartisan haggling. Each side wants to blame the other for the delay in order to win voters. As to how voters respond to that remains to be seen. However, we may not know the answer until long after election night, thanks to COVID-19 and the complexities of mail-in voting. The bottom line is that all the historic divisiveness and uncertainty already attached to this election have been enhanced dramatically by a global pandemic. And ultimately, that means almost anything is possible for the financial markets, depending upon how the election results in the pandemic collectively play out over the next several months. The good news for investors who switch their strategic focus from portfolio growth to retirement income is this. Your strategy is designed to help generate reliable income no matter what happens. If the market does see another major pullback of 20% or more in the coming weeks, it may create a good buying opportunity for income-based investors with the right risk tolerance and the right advisor. Now it's time to bring back in Jeff, as well as our good friend and next guest, David Wright, owner of Wright Financial Group, a retirement income store located in Toledo, Ohio. David is a veteran of the financial service industry with more than 30 years of experience. Dave, thanks so much for being back on the show with us.
Thanks. Great to be back.
So yeah, we talk about all this uncertainty today, and of course, hopefully part of that uncertainty will get ironed out in the next week with election results. But what do you think is the source of uncertainty right now that's most concerning your clients when you talk to them every day?
Really, the most uncertainty that clients are feeling is they just really don't know where the election's going to land. I have to be apolitical here in my practice. Obviously, I'm in a more democratic area of the country, but concerns about regulations in a democratic presidency, of more restrictions, corporate taxes increasing. People read that stuff. Consumers that attend webinars, et cetera, are much more in tune with what's happening in the political world. So this uncertainty over are we going blue or are we going red really concerns people about their portfolio. And they're not getting that kind of advice from their advisor now as to what to do in their pre and post-retirement years to preserve their money.
Yeah, and the good news is you don't have to sugarcoat things around here. You're with friends here on Newsmax. Isn't that right, Jeff, politically speaking?
Oh, there's no doubt about that. You don't have to worry about it. We're apolitical today. So I think, Dave, your concerns that you're hearing from folks are the same concerns that we're hearing down here. And what's happening now, I guess, and I don't know what your feeling is, but the markets are unstable for a number of reasons. And so this political environment that's so conflicting with each other is creating financial chaos in the markets to a certain degree. And so if we have a long, protracted decision-making process on the election, and it takes us 5 weeks or 2 months to figure out who the president's going to be, it's going to be very unkind on the markets. And so at least we have, and you have, position your clients to weather that storm, correct?
That is correct, Jeff. You know, we've all along been talking about income as being the primary driver of retirement. And up here, as I'm sure it is down there, people just don't understand how it's generated, how to even approach retirement with your balance. They come in here, our clients already understand it. And back in March, of course, with COVID's drop, we had very few calls because people understood income is the number one thing that is the driver of their retirement. But folks that come to our webinars and our workshops are totally in the dark because their advisors or perhaps their 401k sponsor, or maybe they're do-it-yourselfers. They've been spoiled. I think they've been spoiled for 10 to 11 years of just this quantitative easing, this rising market. And now they know with this election, things are just really, really scary right now because they don't have a feel for which way things are going to go. And most of them are set to probably be drawing out of their portfolio, engineering their income, taking out of shares just the wrong way. So we set them straight. We try to set them straight here.
Most important lesson, as you're part of the income generation, you need to go from a growth-minded philosophy to an income-minded philosophy.
Absolutely.
Hallelujah. Let's take a quick commercial break. You stay with us. We have a lot more coming up in just a moment right here on the Income Generation. I'm David Scranton, and we'll be right back.
The Income Generation is now available on YouTube. Subscribe to The Income Generation so you never miss a show. You can watch all your favorite episodes now in one place, as well as catch up with your favorite financial guests. Subscribe now to The Income Generation, only on YouTube.
Welcome back to the Income Generation. I'm David Scranton. I'm here with my good friend and co-host Jeff Small, as well as our good friend David Wright, owner of Wright Financial Group, a retirement income store located in Toledo, Ohio. So Dave, I know you talked about a lot of your clients' fears and the concerns about, who ends up taking the Oval Office. But at the end of the day, the quantitative easing is going to continue by the Federal Reserve no matter who's in office. And in some ways, although it's generally considered by Wall Street that Wall Street likes Republicans in office better than Democrats, right now with this whole new version of the CARES Act that basically got stopped up in Congress and as the Senate left, there'll be even more money being doled out if Biden gets elected. So, maybe it's not as bad as people think because of that. Your thoughts?
Well, I would disagree. I would say that down the road, no matter whether a Biden presidency or a Trump presidency occurs, and even if it takes 4.5 or 5 weeks, I think that all of this excessive stimulation to the economy, whether it be through more Trump or Biden, whatever, I think that down the road, we're going to have heck to pay with our markets because people have gotten used to the Federal Reserve jumping in and helping. And my point is, people, I think, need to adopt the new normal that maybe they never have heard of, that their parents invested back, 40, 50 years ago, where we look at what an income source can be from your investments. And I think whether you're blue or you're red, I think more money thrown at the market to keep it alive. I just think down the road, people instinctively know there's going to be heck to pay by all of this debt being accumulated. And I know we needed to do it. We needed to keep people alive during the COVID crisis. And I know that the feds wanted to jump in and help the stock market, even buying into the stock market. But just instinctively, I think both clients and prospects up here in Toledo know that down the road, we're going to have some heck to pay there.
So I just want to say this, I know you're trying to be politically correct, but just so you know, the alternate term for heck is actually in the Bible. So regardless of what everybody else says, if it's in the Bible, you could say it on television, right?
Well, then there's going to be hell to pay.
So that's what, thank you. So, you sound like Jeff Small when you talk about eventually there has to be a day of reckoning. Your thoughts, Jeff?
Well, I think, Dave's exactly right. And so you can't grow the debt faster than you can grow the economy and expect to have the economy catch up. At some point, that's got to invert. We've got to become less debt dependent, because what Dave is actually saying is you create an environment where the economy can't grow anymore when you are constantly stimulating it and over subsidizing it. But Dave, what's going to happen, what I think is going to happen, is that we're going to see tremendous economic stimulus, much more stimulus. We're going to see probably at some point distributions on a continued monthly basis to folks that are below the thresholds of $25,000 a year of income at some point down the line. That's going to have to happen because people can't catch up. And the economy's not going to come back as long as COVID is in play. COVID is going to be the ultimate push down on this. So they've got a blank check mentality right now. But at some point, you're right. That's got to stop.
Exactly. People have to understand what money means to them. And if they're going to get more stimulus, that's fine. But they have to understand that down the road, they're going to need to generate an income stream that pieces in with their Social Security, maybe their other stimulus packages from the government. But at what point does the stock market, do we really understand what the value of a stock is with all of the help that the feds have given the market? It's hard to really get true valuations on any stock today. So my clients, they want predictability, and that's what we're doing.
Well, it's true. Traditional valuation methods have gone out the window for the most part. So it is harder and harder to determine, especially if you're in high dividend paying value stocks, what's undervalued, what's overvalued, what's a value trap. And we talked about that actually on a show just a couple of weeks ago.
Right.
So in the final 45 seconds we have left, bottom line, between now and the end of the year, what do you want our income generation viewers and listeners to know to protect themselves?
I'd like to urge our income generation viewers to understand why you're watching this show. You're watching this show because we're the income generation show. This show focuses on income, and the old norms of growing your balance are going away. We need to understand that our money has a function and a purpose, and you have to understand that the old way of doing business, building your balance, is about to get turned on its head with this election. So understand what you need for income, what you can put in speculative things to see where our market goes over the next 5 to 10 years. But what you need for income, you need to know that it's put in things that can generate income for the long haul. I just hope this election doesn't take 5 weeks to be decided. I think that would be a killer, really.
Great words of wisdom, David. We need to leave it there for now, unfortunately. You stay with us. We're not done yet. We'll be right back in a minute on the income generation. I'd like to thank our guests Steve Forbes and David Wright, as well as my co-host Jeff Small, for joining me today right here on the Income Generation. Of course, most importantly, I want to thank you, our new and returning viewers. If you're like most people, your main thought about this Tuesday's election might very well be, I just can't wait for it to be over. Our lives have already been filled with so much conflict and so much uncertainty since COVID-19 was declared a pandemic back in March, that a divisive presidential race was really the last thing that we wanted. But it's here, and the outcome could have major implications to the economy, for the financial markets, and for your own retirement strategy. So let's review a few key points from today's show. First, remember that historically, a post-election market spike is not uncommon, but usually means little in the long run. History also tells us that the markets tend to be slightly below average in the year following an election, and lower still when a new president is elected compared to when the same president is reelected. Now, that would certainly seem likely with this election. In fact, most analysts believe a Biden victory could mean a market sell-off, although its severity could be limited depending on his ability to implement new measures to address the coronavirus. Remember, too, the election results could have major implications for several issues relevant to older Americans and their finances: taxes, Social Security, healthcare. And finally, remember that the historic unknown at the heart of this year's election, a global pandemic that has already pummeled the economy and has yet to be contained, means almost anything is possible. Here's the good news for investors who've switched your strategic focus from growth to income, is that you're well prepared to meet almost any potential challenge and to take advantage of potential new opportunities. As always, stay safe and thanks for watching. If you're close to or if you're in retirement and you are concerned about your money, it's essential you stay informed and up to date. And as you know, right here is where you can do it on the Income Generation. I'm David Scranton, and we'll see you next week. I'm David Scranton. When it came time for my mom to retire, one simple mistake forced her to work years longer than she should have. And that's why I started the Retirement Income Store, to help hardworking Americans 55 and over plan for the retirement they deserve. I couldn't help my mom, but maybe I can help you.
If you're 55 or older, please claim our free Retirement Income Kit, chock full of information you need to know to get steady income during your retirement. Call 866-314-7227, online at theretirementinComestore.com.